Israel-Hamas war. Netanyahu appears to rebuff Blinken's request for humanitarian pause. As conditions inside Gaza worsen and Israeli attacks on cities like Khan Younis continue, the debate over the idea of humanitarian pauses has intensified. Here is what we know. Israel leader said any ceasefire was contingent on the release of hostages. Israel's military confirmed a strike near Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. The hospital's head said it hit near an entrance, killing at least 13 people and injured many more. Blinken urged Israel's leaders to protect Palestinian civilians and allow more aid into Gaza. Many are killed near a Gaza hospital, its chief says. Any strike the Israelis say was aimed at Hamas. In a high-stakes speech, Hezbollah's leader stops short of calling to expand the Israel-Hamas war. Thousands of Gazan workers stranded in Israel return to a changed home. An American evacuates to Egypt. Let's just hope we can make it. The UN says it needs 4 times as much money for aid efforts for Palestinians. Conditions worsen for civilians in Gaza. Blinken urged Israel's leader to protect Palestinian civilians and allow more aid into Gaza. We need to do more to protect Palestinian civilians, Blinken says. Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken reiterated that Israel has a right to defend itself from Hamas, but pushed for the protection of Palestinian civilians in its military campaign. Shortly after, American Secretary of State visited Israel and asked the country to pause fighting to allow aid into Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister said that a ceasefire would be contingent on the release of Israeli hostages. A tough stance that seemed to be a rebuff to Washington. Contingent. Contingent. Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. How to pronounce the name of Prime Minister of Israel? Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel on Friday and called for a series of humanitarian pauses to allow more deliveries of badly needed food, water, medicine, and other supplies into Gaza, and also to facilitate the release of more than 200 hostages abducted in the deadly October 7 terrorist attacks Hamas launched from the enclave which it controls. I have made clear that we are continuing forcefully and that Israel refused a temporary ceasefire that does not include the release of our hostages, Mr. Netanyahu said. He also stood fast on Israel's refusal to let fuel into Gaza needed to power hospitals and power desalination plants that provide drinking water, even as it allows unlimited shipment of other vital supplies. Mr. Blinken told reporters in Tel Aviv that the United States stood in solidarity with Israel, but said that in meeting with Mr. Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders, he had emphasized that it matters how Israel conducted its campaign to defeat Hamas. The group's October 7 attack killed more than 1,400 people, according to the Israeli government. We provided Israel advice that only the best of friends can offer on how to minimize civilian deaths while still achieving its objective of finding and finishing Hamas terrorists, Mr. Blinken said. He said they had discussed concrete steps to protect civilians and also tangible steps to allow more aid to end Gaza, but did not elaborate on either topic. Elaborate. 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 We provided Israel advice that only the best of friends can offer on how to minimize civilian deaths while still achieving its objective of finding and finishing Hamas terrorists, Mr. Blinken said. He said they had discussed concrete steps to protect civilians and also tangible steps to allow more aid to end Gaza, but did not elaborate on either topic. While President Biden continues to declare unambiguous support for Israel, unambiguous 毫无疑问没有明确的 to declare unambiguous support for Israel, saying the country has a right to defend itself. Concern has been growing within his administration about the mounting Palestinian death toll, which has reached more than 9,200, according to the Hamas-controlled Gazan Health Ministry, as well as the worsening humanitarian conditions and physical detractions brought on by Israel's bombing campaign and the week-old ground invasion. With Israel's ground forces pushing into Gaza's largest city and its airstrikes killing and wounding many more Palestinians every day, anger is rising across the region even as Ms. Blinken tries to keep Israel's adversary from broadening the war. Fighting between Israeli troops and the armed group Hezbollah. What the fuck? The armed group Hezbollah has escalated along Israel's northern border with Lebanon, and Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah gave a fiery speech on Friday denouncing both Israel and the United States. Denouncing Israel's Adversary. Music. Adversaries. With Israel's ground forces pushing into Gaza's largest city and its airstrikes killing and wounding many more Palestinians every day, anger is rising across the region, even as Ms. Blinken tries to keep Israel's adversaries from broadening the war. Fighting between Israeli troops and the armed group Hezbollah has escalated along Israel's northern border with Lebanon, and Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah gave a fiery speech on Friday denouncing both Israel and the United States. After meeting with President Isaac Herzog of Israel, Mr. Blinken said, "It is very important that when it comes to the protection of civilians who are caught in the crossfire of Hamas making, that everything be done to protect them and to bring assistance to those who so desperately need it." But he repeated the United States remained steadfastly behind Israel. He told reporters that he had been shown additional images and videos collected by the Israeli government documenting the slaughter of civilians on October 7. It remains almost beyond human capacity to process, to digest, Mr. Blinken said. They're terrorists, you know. They can do anything, like Chinese government. Digest. Beyond the human capacity to process, to digest. Pauses in the fighting would allow for humanitarian aid to be distributed, would facilitate hostage negotiations, and would let more people exit and would let more people exit Gaza through the Rafah border crossing into Egypt. The administration has said the first several hundred dual nationals, foreigners, and staff members of international organizations were allowed to leave this week. More than a million Gazan has been displaced by the war, and the territory blocked by Israel is dangerously low on food, fuel, water, and medicines. After a complete cutoff of outside aid in the first 2 weeks of the war, scores of trucks with aid are now moving daily into Gaza. That's significant progress in the space of a couple of weeks, but it's also insufficient, Mr. Blinken said, echoing the view of the United Nations and aid groups. Mr. Blinken left Israel for talks in Amman, Jordan, with Jordanian leaders and other regional partners about securing the release of hostages taken by Hamas and about preventing the war from expanding. What the fuck? Blood for blood. So they're small terrorists? Are they small terrorists? Small. Fuck Iran. Fuck Muslim. Many are killed near a Gaza hospital, its chief says, in a strike the Israelis say was aimed at Hamas. As Israeli airstrike hit near the entrance of Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City on Friday, killing multiple people, according to Gazan and Israeli officials, just as Palestinians said a convoy of ambulances was preparing to leave the hospital carrying wounded people to the Gaza border to cross into Egypt for treatment. The Israeli military said it has carried out the strike on an ambulance being used by a Hamas terrorist cell, adding in a statement that a number of Hamas terrorist operatives were killed in the strike. An Israeli military spokesman, Meir Neil Dana, confirmed that it was the same strike that caused the explosion outside the hospital. The head of Al-Shifa Hospital, Dr. Mohammad Abu Samia, said that 13 people had been killed and many were injured. He said that paramedics and patients in the evacuation convoy was among the injured, but that none had been killed. The death toll could not be independently verified. The explosion happened about 4 o'clock 7 p.m. About 4 8:30 2:40. So the correct pronunciation is the explosion happened about 4:30 p.m. according to local report. Hours earlier, a spokesman for the health ministry, Ashraf al-Qudra, had announced in a news conference that a convoy carrying a large number of injured people would head south on al-Rashid, a coastal highway, at 4 p.m. toward the Rafah border crossing. A number of severely injured people have in recent days been taken to Egypt for medical treatment that is not available in the Gaza Strip. In a later news conference, Mr. Al-Quda said that the convoy had left the hospital and had gotten to a nearby roundabout. Answer when it was hit by an airstrike. The convoy turned back and when it got back to the entrance of Al-Shifa, it was hit again, he said. He said 15 people have been killed and 60 wounded. Al-Shifa Hospital has been at the center of numerous claims and crises since the start of the war. Israel says the Hamas, which controls Gaza and orchestrated a deadly attack on Israel on October 7, is operating a command center beneath the hospital. Hamas has denied that. Fuck Hamas. Orchestrated. Al-Shifa Hospital has been at the center of numerous claims and crises since the start of the war. Israel says the Hamas, which controls Gaza and orchestrated a deadly attack on Israel on October 7, is operating a command center beneath the hospital. Hamas has denied that. Displaced Gazans are living in and around the facility, believing it to be safer than other alternatives. The Gaza Health Ministry and international aid group says Al-Shifa is running out of fuel and has had to curtail operations aimed at continued cut-off of electricity and fuel from Israel. Doctors have said they are treating large numbers of people wounded in airstrikes without enough medicine and supplies. Ismail Hou, who was ferning inside the hospital at the time of the explosion, said he heard a blast near the ambulances and ran outside to see what had happened. He saw dozens of casualties, he said. Salama Marov, the spokesman for the Hamas-led Gaza administration, said that one of his employees, Hassan Harel, was among the dead. Ali Jud. What the fuck? The names? The fuck names? A, a photographer for Turkey's state-run Anadolu agency said that he was at the hospital with his sister. They were visiting their mother, who had been severely injured. Who had been severely injured in an attack that destroyed their family home and killed four of their siblings as well as their father. They were near the entrance of the hospital when the explosion occurred. He said his sister was hit by shrapnel. 弹片吗？ Shrapnel. His sister was hit by shrapnel. In a high-stakes speech, Hezbollah's leader stopped short of calling to expand the Israel-Hamas war. Since the war in Gaza began after Hamas' surprise attack on Israel on October 7, people across the Middle East has feared it could set off a second war between Israel and Hezbollah was between Israel and Hezbollah, the powerful Lebanese military, and ignite a border regional conflagration. Ignite. Broader. 扩大的 broader regional conflagration. Since the war in Gaza began after Hamas' surprise attack on Israel on October 7, people across the Middle East have feared it could set off a second war between Israel and Hezbollah, the powerful Lebanese military, and ignite a broader regional conflagration. That is not Hezbollah's plan, the group's leader Hassan Nasrallah said in a widely anticipated address to his followers on Friday, his first public remark since the start of the war. Hezbollah, he said, was already doing what it set out to do, exchange fire with a portion of Israel's military to keep it tied up along the northern border with Lebanon. Lebanon.
Hezbollah.
Hezbollah, he said, was already doing what it set out to do, exchanging fire with a portion of Israel's military to keep it tied up along the northern border with Lebanon, reducing the burden on Hamas. Lebanon's front has loosened a large part of the forces that were going to escalate the attack on Gaza, Mr. Nasrallah said. Some in Lebanon say that we are taking a risk. It's true, but this risk is part of beneficial, correct calculation. Israel and Hezbollah have clashed repeatedly along the Israel-Lebanon border since the war began, targeting each other's positions and killing combatants on both sides. Mr. Combatants and killing combatants on both sides, Mr. Nasrallah retreats, which lasted more than an hour and repeatedly erupted into fiery crescendos, was far from a call for peace, but it fit with analysts' assessment that Israel and Hezbollah appeared to be calibrating their actions to avoid setting off a broader war. Mr. Nasrallah described Hezbollah's objective as a controlled battle along the border aimed at sapping Israel's morale and resources. Collaborate. Collaborating. Calibrating appears to be calibrating their actions to avoid setting off a broader war. Mr. Nasrallah described Hezbollah's objective as a controlled battle along the border aimed at sapping Israel's morale and resources. Israel and Hezbollah has clashed repeatedly along the Israel-Lebanon border since the war began, targeting each other's position and killing combatants on both sides. Mr. Nasrallah's address, which lasted more than an hour and repeatedly erupted into fiery into fiery crescendos, was far from a call for peace, but it fit with analysts' assessment that Israel and Hezbollah appeared to be calibrating their actions to avoid setting off a broader war. Mr. Nasrallah described Hezbollah's objective as a controlled battle along the border aimed at sapping Israel's morale and resources. The Lebanese front was lessened a large part of the forces that were going to escalate the attack on Gaza, Mr. Nasrallah said. Some in Lebanon say that we are taking a risk. It's true, but this risk is part of beneficial, correct calculation. Israel and Hezbollah have clashed repeatedly along the Israel-Lebanon border since the war began, targeting each other's positions and killing combatants on both sides. Mr. Nasrallah's address, which lasted more than an hour and rapidly erupted into fire crescendos, was far from a call for peace. But if it was analyst assessment that Israel and Hezbollah appear to be calibrating their actions to avoid setting off a broader war. Mr. Nahara described Hezbollah's objective as a controlled battle along the border aimed at sapping Israel's marrow and resources.